All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Remodelers on the Rise. I have a special, Mark, I've done about 100 of these shows. I rarely pull out I have a special guest.
Thank you.
I mean, if you went back and listened.
Special, be careful, has a lot of connotations.
That is very true. Where I'm going with it is a special guest, somebody who is known in our industry. Mark and I, before we started this recording, I have Mark Richardson here, by the way. We'll do a little more intro, but before we started talking, we both were kind of like, have we talked before? I think maybe briefly, or maybe at International Builder Show or a Modeler Show. But as I was telling Mark, I have followed his work for a long time. We were just talking about how I went down a rabbit hole about a year ago thinking about the history of coaching and consulting in the remodeling industry. Here, I'm making a living and building my business and life around coaching and consulting. And Mark told me about a episode he did on his podcast. What's your podcast called?
Remodeling Mastery.
Remodeling Mastery. So if you're listening to this podcast or if you're listening to it live, look up Remodeling Mastery and you'll find Mark's. But he did the history of remodeling. I'm going to look that up after we're done here. And I've got his book here, How Fit Is Your Business? Mark's written 4 books. So Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to talk about the softening market and what you need to do about it, kind of what we're seeing out there. But if we could start, could you do a little intro of yourself, a little bit about your background, and then we'll dig into the topic?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think oftentimes when I'm introduced, it's usually as, an author or writing for the magazines or different kind of accolades that certainly I've been fortunate enough. But at the end of the day, I more than anything look in the mirror and I see a remodeler like all the folks that, hopefully are listening to this. I have, sawdust in my blood, and I have, a passion first and foremost, like many of you doing this. My roots are a little bit unique, but not drastically. I actually studied architecture in the 70s. And when I got out of architecture school, which my thesis in architecture school was design build, and got out of architecture school in the late 70s, I actually started a design build company with one of my advisors at Virginia Tech, and where we would actually go out and meet with clients, design the projects. Then we'd come to construction contract, and then we strap on the tools and build it. It was like the ultimate design build experience. And then he decided to go back and teach. And I joined a fellow by the name of Fred Case, who had a little construction company at the time, Case Construction. And I was kind of the design piece that kind of fused into his construction that ultimately allowed us to, as we've been recognized on Pioneer Design Build, and it's become kind of a household term around the country, beginning in 1980. We grew the business, pretty substantial size, early 90s, hit the wall, decided, we better do something, and not else, but to supplement. We launched handyman services. Handyman services very quickly grew. We launched a bath division, a kitchen division, and then 1998, a national business. And then when I stepped down as president, we were just shy of about 100 million in revenue. And then I stepped down as chairman in 2012. And, I share that, not only that history, but that even scale of business more from the perspective of, when you grow a business and you move from, what the beginning was 400 or 500 to million to 5 million, 10, so on, all the way up. The altitude is really different at these different scale. And while most people really have a big yearning for growth and growth in a business, they don't necessarily know what it's like to breathe at that next level. And that's a big part of what, certainly, obviously you do, Kyle, is help people with that. But also that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years.
Awesome. Wonderful. So, having lived through, I'm guessing, a few trying times in the economy, going back over those decades and seeing those different things. When we reached out to you and you said, "Yeah, I'd be happy to come on the show," my next email was, "Well, what would be a talking point or a topic that you'd like to dig into?" And this was the one that you brought back, which I think is very fitting for where we're at here in August 2022. It certainly feels like there's indicators out there, even just here locally in Michigan, seeing more homes on the market that are staying on the market, seeing my neighbors down the street who are trying to sell their house, and here we are 2 months in and they just had an open house, seeing interest rates, the gas pump. We got elections coming up again. We've been living through arguably some of the best times. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. Some of the best times in the remodeling industry, even with supply chain issues and labor issues, we've been on quite a nice little ride here over the last 6-8 years. But you've seen the downturns, you've seen the ups and downs. So what we want to dig into is the softening market. What do you need to do about it? So what are some of the things that you're seeing out there, and why would you say maybe it is a bit of a softening market? What are you seeing?
So to just take a quarter step back, and I do believe as horrific as certainly COVID and the pandemic has been for the remodeling industry, it's been a major silver lining. For all the reasons that so I'm not going to run through the 10 reasons because it's so obvious that at this point. But to try to kind of turn the clock back, I mean, one of the luxuries, since I'm not out there doing it like your listeners are, I get to think about this stuff a lot. And 2 years ago, I started to talk about that we were in a fog. We didn't know what was ahead of us. We didn't know left or right, whether there was a cliff, but it was kind of a fog. And then about 6 months, 9 months after that, a friend of mine says, I love that imagery of driving in a fog, but we're not in the fog. The fog is ahead of us. It's pretty clear that the phone is ringing off the hook, sales are coming in, and it's very, very robust, but we don't know really what's out there yet, certainly be in large part because of the pandemic. And then I guess about 9 months ago, I started thinking about another metaphor that was really hitting me. I do a lot of bike riding over on the Eastern Shore. And, this notion of headwinds and tailwinds have a lot to do with whether I not only have a successful ride, but whether I enjoy it or not. And, we had a lot of headwinds happening in terms of supply chain, in terms of price escalation, in terms of the labor kind of challenges, but pushing very hard behind it was the tailwinds. And the tailwinds were the consumer demand, lead flow coming in, record levels of lead flow, and sales. And sales were very, very easy, quite frankly. I say that lovingly to your listeners, but it was an order taker mindset. It wasn't selling, it was order taking. And then backlogs were, of course, increasing to the point where that became its own challenge. So starting about 3 months ago, I think I started to see a shift that's happening out there, and a lot of this was driven by, again, obvious kind of things. Certainly inflation. We saw the interest rate issues. We saw the new housing market almost coming to a halt in many ways. And then all of a sudden that has a trickling effect on remodeling moving forward. So, bring it up to today. The question is not so much kind of are things softening or not. They're softening for all the reasons that Although what's interesting, Kyle, is some of the remodelers, I talked to someone about a month ago, and she was talking about it, sighs of relief. And, is it summer is here and kids are getting out of school? And I stopped her in a footstep. I said, Julie, that's not good. That's not what's happening. It's the market that's changing. And the real question, I think, for you and certainly your listeners, are what are you doing about it? The great thing is, unlike some of the others, to your earlier point, Kyle, I've experienced probably 4 or 5 downturns in my career, but unlike the others, I don't think this is going to be, it's going to be not, are you going to make it? It's going to be how smart you are as a result of the actions that you take to get through it. You'll get through it just fine. There's way too much demand still there. There's way too much, backlog of activity that you have in your book still there. So you'll get through it. The question is, are you going to get through it and come out of the other end really strong, or are you going to struggle?
Yeah, in my conversations, what's interesting, and I'm glad that you just kind of went through the 3 months ago and kind of what we're seeing here. Even that rosy picture of this isn't 2008. This isn't like previous times. It's unique in its own right. But one of the things that I think is happening right now is there has been such a strong backlog of work. We've got work through the rest of the year. We got work into next year. And I'm starting to sense from my clients that's starting to kind of creep back down. And they're getting a little bit more resistance on people saying yes. And all of a sudden, in my coaching, I do a lot around the sales process, a lot around financials, leadership. But there's a fourth pillar that I do my work in, which is marketing. I have not talked about marketing a lot in the last 3 years. People are not excited to get on a one-on-one coaching call. Kyle, we need to focus on our marketing today. But all of a sudden, over the last 3 or 4 months, similar kind of time frame of view, maybe we should be thinking about marketing. Things are seeming to be a little slower. People aren't quite saying yes. Maybe we've got to take this marketing thing more seriously. So as far as what are you going to do about it, if we're seeing these signs, one thing that comes to my mind is it's time to re-engage in marketing. It's time to do some fundamentals, back to some basics of good, smart marketing efforts, tracking where your leads are coming from. Go out there and get those Google reviews. Make sure your website is rock solid. So that's one of the things that, as far as what are you doing about what you're seeing, marketing people, put your marketing hat on. What are some of the things that are coming to your mind if you're in the shoes of a design, build, remodeler here in August 2022? What are some of the things that you're wanting them to focus on, or what would you be focusing on?
Yeah, so I kind of look at it with like 3 legs of the stool that you should be putting, calories into it. And I use the word very specifically calories because, you need to put in a certain amount of energy, a certain amount of time, a certain amount of calories into. And the 3 kind of legs of the stool, I believe, are first and foremost you and your leadership. Because if at the end of the day, you're all wiggly and confused and you're not aligned with your team in terms of what you need to be thinking about and doing. And quite frankly, if it gets a little bit scary out there in the next month, 2 months, 3 months, you need to be a therapist. You need to be, that parent, so to speak, to really create the level of confidence and not fears that are be out there. So number one, you need to be putting calories into leadership, one-on-one with your other leaders. Get out there with your folks, let them know how well positioned you are, and things are going to be just fine. And don't, keep it a secret if you're putting energy into things that will be good prescriptions. Number 2, and Kyle, you just brought this up, is marketing. When the phone's been ringing off the hooks, the marketing folks within companies have been like the Maytag man with nothing to do. Matter of fact, many really, really strong remodelers, almost embarrassed about turning the marketing faucet off for the last year or 2, are now realizing, number one, maybe that wasn't so smart. They should have at least had a trickle coming through. And now they're retraining and everything else. But marketing, though, to me is not an expense necessarily. It's about marketing energy. You need to think about deputizing different members of your team to not just be focused on doing the work, but also telling your story and looking for new marketing opportunities. You need to not be strangers with your past clients and all those prospects that you have had that have come through. 65% of those never did the project. So why aren't you just going back and, keeping in touch with all those prospects in the last 18 months that didn't come through? So
preach it, Mark. You're talking my language here.
I'm sure I am.
But you also understand that 57% of all statistics are made up.
There you go.
But
Well,
but you're about right. 65. That 65% comes from years of experience in tracking, and that is,
exactly.
yeah, I
I
understand.
mean, that's what we found. We had a robust marketing team that we used to track those things. And quite frankly, when after 10, 20 years, it's always the same number.
Yeah.
I don't need to track it all the time. And the last one is sales. As I said earlier, you have been, and I say this respectfully, an order taker when it comes to sales. And it's only been in the last few months that you have seen, now all of a sudden I have to sell again. So number one, you've got to understand who the new consumer is. The new consumer is a fear-based consumer. You have to know how to sell to their fears, not just their fantasies. So you've got to be able to sell, and you have to sell. You've got to sharpen the sales axe, and you've got to have very strong sales processes, sales skills, sales techniques, and you have to have strong salespeople. The weaker salespeople on your team are not going to make it through this softening time. So therefore, there might be some hard decisions you have to make there. So those are the three pillars that I recommend, Kyle, in the kind of column of this is what you do about it. And if you do things on each one of those, then I think you're going to be just fine. You'll get through it, and probably you'll get through it and come out the other end much, much better. Now, if you look at the Harvard numbers, I'm involved in Harvard's Remodeling Futures. They're still expecting, I think, certainly a turn down in the bottom, the last half of this year. But it's still, there's a lot of demand that's out there that'll carry into next year.
Okay. If you're watching this live, we'd love a couple comments. We'd love a question or two that we could grab live. So please don't be shy about that. But Mark, I wasn't watching myself, but I was taking some notes on what you said and probably smirking the whole time. Smirking for a couple of reasons. One, I love that analogy of, all right, we got three main legs. Well, what about financials? What about job costing? What about HR? Yes. But what you're hearing here is a voice of experience and a professional coach telling you, look, if things are softening, if things are getting a little wild out there, I liked how you said it. If you're getting a little wiggly, these are the three legs of the stool that you need to focus most of your attention to and invest calories, invest energy, put a focused effort towards these three. So we'll just use the last 12, 13 minutes of this, except for questions people ask, just going through each of these three because I have some follow-ups related to it. On that leadership one, what was just coming to my mind is if you as the leader are feeling wiggly, are feeling confused, if you and your other leadership team, whether that's just your office manager and project manager, whether you have more than that, we need to, each one of us needs to take the role and the title of leader more seriously. And it's an area that people need to study. They need to read books. They need to consume content. They need to fill their tank and learn new skills and something fresh and something dynamic that you can then lead your team well with. The other big thing you said there is as things get wonkier out there or things get softened, you need to get closer to each team member, one-on-ones. I don't have time to have lunch with that person. I'm too busy. You don't have time not to. Sit down and have lunch with a key team member. Get to know them better, what they're going through, what do they need help with. Have breakfast. A 10-minute meeting. Spend one-on-one time and lead and listen and ask questions and figure out how you as a leader can help, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and I think, and to your point, I mean, you have to, when it comes to your business and leadership, you've got to start to adopt to be a little bit more a student of success. You've got to, really be fulfilled by learning more. You have to become more of a learning organization, not just a doing organization. And when you develop, I think, that within yourself, then layer that within your leadership team and then the rest of your company, you're gonna, like I said, kind of, not only drink the Kool-Aid on this, but you'll see the level of alignment that you need to move forward.
I was golfing up north, summertime in northern Michigan. It doesn't get any better, Mark. I don't know if you knew that.
I am told. Matter of fact,
When was the last time you've
I'm
been in
actually
Michigan?
a Michigander originally. That's where my
Oh,
family originally is from Michigan. So
what town? Do you know? You
I
remember what
know,
town?
yeah, Drayton Plains and Pontiac
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
and Lansing and over on the West Coast with Grand Haven,
Yep.
those
Excellent.
areas.
So get your butt in northern Michigan. But I was in northern Michigan last month playing some golf, and I was not that I like to play fast, but if I'm by myself, I like to play fast. So I was playing through this threesome in front of me, and they were kind of all just looking at each other. I said, "Looks like you guys are solving the world's problems." And they said, "Yeah, we're trying. You got any advice for us?" And I said, "I got advice for two things. Number one, stop swinging so hard. Swing easier, and the ball will go better. And number two, stop paying so much stinking attention to the news. It only makes you depressed." And they both came to me, and I felt pretty good about it. I'm like, that was two good pieces of advice. But one thing you said in leadership is you have to create a level of confidence, not fears. There is enough people hitting us with, this is happening, inflation. Oh, we're in a recession. Maybe we are, maybe we're not. All of this negative. You as a leader need to instill confidence, and you need to fill yourself up with things that's going to help you be confident so that you can then give that to your team. That should be a takeaway to anybody listening to this. That is a call from Mark and Kyle to take your leadership mantle and spend a little bit more calories on it. There we go. Number two, marketing. Deputize different members of your team to tell the story. What are other marketing opportunities out there? What are a couple of the things that you really love when it comes to marketing that you usually would deputize your team to focus on?
Well, what's interesting is when you drill into and kind of even just kind of sit under a tree and think about, what members of your team do your clients love the most? Generally, it's not you, the owner, and it's not the salesperson. It's actually the craftsman. So if you can actually train the craftsman, I remember, for example, getting a letter from a client, many, many years ago, and she was, happy about the project, but she said, the biggest impression is my dog is depressed because he does not have the opportunity to share lunch with the carpenter.
Oh my.
Right. Or another one was from a single woman who had two little kids and was almost in tears through her words about the carpenter and helper shoveling the driveway for an hour and a half so she could get to her job and they could get to daycare. And my point is less about, you don't need all those kind of stories, but you need to realize that if you could train your craftsmen, you could deputize them to be marketers. And there's so many ways to do it, but they don't think of themselves that way. So it takes a little bit of time. But if you can start to even incentivize them to generate leads for the company or opportunities for the company, it's not that hard to do, but you can see huge rewards by doing it. So that would be one that is, very proven, tested, and it certainly was an integral part of what we did for many, many years. And, if you can have this be a team sport and not just be about your marketing coordinator doing it or your outside agency, you're going to see better results.
I like that.
I'm a big believer in kind of a nice blend of high tech and high touch things. If you blend those two together, you're going to create some really smart stuff. But a lot of it is, we talked before with Kyle, it's calories. How many hours per week can you devote to this? Most remodelers probably are spending an hour or two a week to one of the most important things you could be doing. So at least bump it up to 4 to 6 hours.
I like that. Jim's listening. He said, have some calories with your team. I think he was talking about breakfast or lunch, and then spend them on your process, on improving things. I like it. Nice play off there, Jim. And I'd say to piggyback on what you just shared related to empowering your team, one, it's an attitude, it's a culture. But the phrase I like to use is, running a successful remodeling business is about doing a lot of little things right. And what you just described of shoveling this, of paying attention and taking the time to pet the dog, to know the dog's name, all of those little things have a compound effect. So practically speaking, if you're trying to get that into your team more and more, next time you have a team meeting, you better have an agenda item that says acknowledgement of little things. All right, folks. We need 10 little things that you either witnessed somebody on our team doing or that you did yourself. Let's go. Number one, I brought in the mail the other day. Awesome. That's a little thing that enhances things. Number two, what is it? Get them involved and see that we're wanting to talk about it more and be consistent in talking about it. Little things matter. And then on the marketing front, the other thing you mentioned is you've got your most valuable marketing asset, remodelers. That is your previous client list. They already know, like, and trust you. You have a relationship with them. And when you look at the top line revenue that you're bringing into your remodeling business, the majority of it is coming from repeat work from those lovely folks or referrals from those folks. And there's too many of you that if I did a kitchen project with you 2 years ago, I haven't heard squat from you in those 2 years. Some of you've never stayed in touch. So when you think marketing, how do we stay in touch with our previous clients? That can be, I'm going to make 3 phone calls a week. That could be, I'm going to sign up for Remodelers Autopilot. And Kyle, you're going to make it easy for me to get that email newsletter out each month. It's a service I offer, Mark. But staying in touch with previous clients, I echo that, and that's huge. And then the third one,
thing too, Kyle, real quickly, is your clients don't necessarily know what you can do. And I say that because if you've renovated, and Kyle mentioned this, you renovated someone's kitchen and you're a full service remodeler, they may not know you specialize in master baths. They may not know that you are an outdoor living expert. They may not know that you do a lot of basement bars and interiors. So don't also keep it a secret that you do much more, because when you do a project for someone, they think of you as a specialist of what you did for them, not what you can do for the house.
I like that. And then the third stool is, you talked about sales. I want to hear a little bit more about this fear-based consumer. What do you mean by that, and what are you kind of seeing with that?
Well, in sales, and without getting in too much in terms of sales mastery stuff, but we all know that there are 3 primary objections that people get. I want to think about it. I'm getting other bids. Your price is too high. They represent 2/3 of the objections. Yep. But today, those are not the real objections. Those are just facades. Those are just excuses for, I'm watching what interest rates are. I'm watching what's going on in terms of the stock market. I'm watching what's going on in terms of this war thing. I'm watching, this price escalation and the prices of gas pumps. So my excuse is, I'm getting other bids. I want to think about it, or your price is too high. So what you have to do is you've got to go deeper with the relationships. Why? Because the best way to counteract fear is going to have a deeper relationship. I work with someone who said, I would spend 18 minutes a year or so on my initial call, and now it's 28 minutes with that client Why is he doing that? To go deeper with the relationship. So that's one thing. You've got to go deeper. Second is, there's this wonderful little adage in sales. People buy emotionally, but rationalize their decisions logically. So the key to that simple little adage is not the emotional buy. It's, what are you doing with the logic? What you have to do is you have to pepper in logic into the conversation early on. Logic, for example, I did a study years ago. In the previous 3 years, cost of remodeling has gone up on average 18% per year. Well, do your clients know that? That is a fact. That is something I wrote a column about. Refer to that column or refer to any data out there. Many of your clients think of remodeling like a commodity that's going to go down in price 12 months from now, but 100% of the remodelers I talk to, no one thinks it's going to go down. They only think it's going to go up. Yep. Therefore, don't keep that fact, that logic, a secret. For example, the cost of moving, the act of moving versus remodeling is 10 to 20% of the cost of the new home. That is a number. It's a fact. And I can explain the why behind it. But more importantly, as a sales technique, you've got to do that. One last thing, 3 E's that I really, really talk a lot about. The 3 E's is easy, early, and every time. You got to make it easy for them to understand. Your client's ignorance is your biggest competitor. Second is you've got to do it early. Don't wait till the drum roll in the close. Plant these seeds of the logic. Plant these reasons why to do the project now, why to do it with you early on. And lastly, if you do it every time, you become masterful of the process.
People listen to this recording. Yes, you can pause it right now, rewind it, click the little button to rewind it 3 minutes, and listen to that whole spiel again. Because there's like 6 little golden nuggets in there of, the logic aspect. I literally was talking, hey, Peter Dotson Construction out in California. I was talking to Peter this morning, and we're talking through his sales pipeline a little bit. And I said, how we doing with getting these through design and development? How are they looking? Come on, we need some. And he said, well, we just had somebody say we're putting a hold on it, and we're hoping that prices are going to go down in the future. Logic right there. Did Peter talk about that? Easy, early, and every time? He didn't. Did he on his heels when he got that objection? They brought it up. Was he saying, well, it technically, what I've seen is it's just going to go up and up and up. Now all of a sudden he was playing off his heels versus helping them understand that logic. And like you're mentioning there, you plant that seed and you make that very clear to them. Sometimes those are the little linchpins that help them say yes versus no. It is super interesting that we have been very much order takers. Wait a minute, you can fit us in? Wait a minute, you're saying yes? Wait a minute, you called us back? Thank you so much. That's going to change. You're going to have to sell. I remember this was about a year or two ago, probably about 2 years, and I was talking to Josh Nelson, a builder over on the west side of your family's old stomping grounds over on the west side of Michigan, New Haven and Holland area. And he said, I said, what are you doing next, Josh? He goes, well, I'm presenting this $90,000 bathroom. And I said, are you just going to present it, or are you going to sell, Josh? You going to sell this thing? You're going to talk about your team. You're going to talk about your process. You're going to talk about all the little things, job site cleanliness. You're going to talk about how fantastic you are, or are you just going to present it? And there is a totally different mentality. We need to dust off our sales skills, and we need to get ready for harder times that could be and most likely are coming up. And even if they don't turn to harder times, you sharpening your sales axe, like Mark said, is going to prove very beneficial to you. And easy, early, and every time. That's really solid. I like it, Mark. Did I mention, Mark, that it's a 30-minute show?
Yes, you did.
I think I might have. Good.
I think clearly we're on a bit of a roll on all this stuff. But that's true. The bottom line, I think, from my perspective, is that you have to be today the voice of reason. The voice of reason for certainly your clients, the voice of reason for your team, and even look in the mirror, the voice of reason for yourself. And you'll get through this muckiness of, the next 3, 6, 9 months. But these are actions that you need to take. I just was quoting a little adage that I love, intentions without actions equals squat. So you can listen to a podcast like this, but if you don't do anything from what Kyle and I are talking about, it's going to equal squat. We've just entertained you. That's all. But if you grab 1 or 2 little things from it and you actually do something about it, you can reduce the risk, reduce the liability for you and your business, and actually see better returns. So that's really what I would encourage from, what we've talked about.
Love it. So we've this is the longest we've ever talked, and Mark, we're cut from the same cloth. What you just said there is pretty much how I talk about I usually halfway through my presentation, I'm like, wait, did you come just so you could have another 50 ideas? Were you lacking ideas? You just really needed more? No, you've got more ideas than what you need to know. You need to be motivated. You need to be encouraged. You need to narrow your focus down to one item that you're actually going to stink and do something with. And that's what Mark just said there. So before you kind of move on with your next thing, write something down that you heard. What is your takeaway from this conversation we had? And what is one thing you're going to do? It might be calling that employee of yours that you haven't had one-on-one time with and calling them. It might be a marketing related thing. It might be a sales related thing. It might be building your confidence and making sure you're leading well, but there's got to be a takeaway or two. Even if they don't take away, it was fairly entertaining. I would say we had a little joke and we had a little fun. And it was very, very solid. Mark, if people wanted to hear more from you or be introduced to you more, where would you point them, sir?
So they're certainly welcome to contact me directly, and or if you will go online, it's Mark G. Richardson. There's a ton of Mark Richardsons in the world, so Mark G. Richardson is a good way to search, and you can certainly get to a lot of stuff that way. I've written several books, so you're certainly welcome to do that. You can also contact me directly at mrichardson@mgrichardson.com, or you're welcome to call me at 301-275-0208.
Wonderful. What does the G stand for, Mark?
Gregory.
Gregory. I like it. I like it. Cool. And now people have your middle name, they have your phone number,
Right.
they have your email address. You are out there, and there's millions of people that listen to this podcast. So heads up, your phone might blow up. But it is something to be said. I put it out there. I put my phone number out there from time to time. I just actually got a text this morning from a remodeler. Don't be shy. Sometimes you're just stuck in a 10-minute conversation with Mark. A 10-minute conversation with me can just give you a little extra motivation and push you in the right direction. So, smart remodelers are all that's something I love about this industry is, especially because it's, talking to a remodeler in Florida versus I'm here in Michigan. This is perfect. And Remodelers Advantage has helped facilitate this. Different peer groups, the different conferences we go to over the years. This industry, there's a lot of people that are willing to help and willing to guide and willing to give you a nudge in the right direction. Don't be shy. That is one of the biggest keys to improving your remodeling business. Mark, it was a pleasure. We might have to do this again, sir.
Absolutely. No,
Excellent.
it's great to meet you via your show, and wish you and certainly your audience all the best. And let's not be strangers.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care.